Place Day One.
Welcome to the Filmcast review of A Quiet Place Day One, directed by Michael Sarnowski. I'm going to read the plot summary from the internet. When New York City comes under attack from an alien invasion, a woman and other survivors try to find a way to safety. End quote. All right, Devindra Hardwar, let's start with you. I mean, what are your thoughts on A Quiet Place as a series? Because I feel like you weren't super positive on certainly the second one.
Second one was it felt like it didn't really add much to it. I thought the first one, I think we all liked the first one.
Yeah.
But I mainly thought it was like a really fun genre exercise that was maybe limited by the scope of the narrative, because a lot of that movie really feels like the ultimate dad dream. The dad, I know society falls. I know what we're going to do. We're going to have a farmhouse. We're going to get all the supplies. We're going to build a security system. It's true dad wish fulfillment. So it just always seemed kind of funny that was it.
Yeah.
And I think all dads, Jeff, maybe you agree, have those moments when you have kids I know what I'm going to do. I know what I'm going to do when things fall apart. So that's what that movie felt like. It was really well made, but I thought it was limited in terms of what it was doing. Quiet Place Part 2 didn't really add much to it. It was just a direct sequel, but man, that first one was a fun ride.
It was a slight continuation of the story from A Quiet Place Part 1.
And Cillian Murphy was in it for some
Well, it
reason.
was also a prequel.
No.
Oh,
They
yeah,
showed-
yeah.
yeah.
The opening
Yes.
scene.
The opening was a
the opening scene actually shows events that might be
Yes.
concurrent
Yes.
with some of the events that we see in A Quiet Place Day One, right? So, yeah.
So I'm not in love with this franchise. I did love the experience of seeing the first one. I remember that idea that, even the entire audience is really quiet during this, because it seemed like it was disturbing the movie. So that mechanic I think is really cool. But yeah, I wasn't really hyped to see this thing. I don't know if we needed a prequel to the first Quiet Place.
So that said, what did you think of A Quiet Place Day One? Is this a movie that you feel does add to the mythology or add to the experience of watching these movies?
I think this is my favorite Quiet Place movie. This movie is better than I expected it to be, and I think better than it has any right to be. And then for the longest time, I didn't realize it's Michael Sarnowski who did this. It's the guy who did Pig, which was another movie where if you talk about the plot of Pig, you're like, oh, this is a revenge thriller. We're going to see Nicolas Cage hell-bent on revenge for 2 hours or something. And I think once again, Sarnowski has a pitch for the type of movie he could make. And there are traces of that here. There are traces of this movie just be doing prequel work, but not really that much. This is, I think, a really powerful and humanistic story about the value of life. Even as the world falls apart, I think Lupita Nyong'o is fantastic in this. This is another incredible genre performance, just like her in Us, that I think will probably get overlooked as we start to talk about how, serious acting awards and things like that. I found her really compelling. And the thing I'll say is, I guess the setting of who she is and why she's in the city and all that was not really clear in the trailers, or at least the trailers I've seen. I'm not going to say too much about that, but I think what's interesting is that Sarnowski does a great job of showing how people have to live with pain, and it's pain not in an overly saccharine sense, not making Oscar bait, but it's pain in a very humanistic way. This person has come to terms with the horrible things that have happened to them in life, and they're willing to accept that the end may be near for them even before aliens arrive. Same thing with Pig. A lot of that movie is Nicolas Cage's character living in regret and the pain of the life he left behind and everything. So I find that all really fascinating, and that element is so strong in this movie. So I loved it. The set pieces are fine, and there are some elements that are kind of silly. There is a cat in this movie, and just like the baby in the first Quiet Place, it's the aliens, they come to noise, and the co-star of this movie is a noisy little creature. This cat never meows once. Incredible. Never only does one cat-like thing that could attract danger. So it's just, I don't know if they did that on purpose, or if this is animals will partially help to save us, sort of like a pig thing. Or if it's just hey, is he even making fun of the contrivance from the first movie? Because the last thing you want in a post-apocalypse where you can't make noise is a freaking baby. It's just kind of funny. But there are elements of it that I can gloss over easily to look at what is great about this movie is a great humanistic story especially like multiple characters come in and out of the story, but the parts with like Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn, I think, are specifically fantastic. So I loved it. Love the ending. Love everything about it.
All right. So glad you enjoyed it, Devindra. Jeff Kanata, curious what you thought of A Quiet Place Day One.
Well, Dave, I guess you could say what I thought of A Quiet Place Day One, not part one. It's best summed up in the form of a limerick.
Oh, let's hear it, Jeff.
New characters, and both are nice. But there's nothing I haven't seen twice. They promised day one, but when it's all done, they only deliver a slice.
Mm.
Oh,
Oh, a little bigger.
That one's a thinker. The thinker, Jeff. Got to go back and think about that one again. Yeah.
I don't disagree with most of what Devindra said about sort of the lovely parts of this movie. I think Lupita Nyong'o is fantastic. And I liked her. I cared about and for her. Couldn't care less about the dumb cat. But
Jeff, we're gonna have to dive into this at some point. Like,
cat
you're
thing
just
or
anti
pet
all
thing?
animals. It seems.
No,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
hate animals. I like animals.
You just don't want them in your house
or my movies
or within 5 feet. Yeah,
He just doesn't want to look at them or think about them.
or think about, or touch them, or feel them, or smell them.
now you guys get it.
Yeah.
Here's my biggest problem with this movie. It adds nothing. And I got to tell you, there's a promise in that title. There's a promise that it unfulfills. It does not fulfill that promise.
Unfulfills. Is that a verb?
Now it is. Left unfulfilled. I want to mention a specific moment from very early in the movie. So if you want zero spoilers, skip forward, 30 seconds, minute, whatever. It is very early in the film. Very,
agreed.
very early.
Within the first 20 minutes.
But there's a very specific moment I want to call out, which is day one is happening. And what's this craziness? All this craziness is happening. Our main character gets knocked unconscious. And when she wakes up, we got it all figured out. All the day one stuff, which is, how did they figure it out? All that, that's the exciting part. And it literally yada yadas it.
You think it's that hard for the U.S. military to figure out that these aliens are attracted to sound?
I'm not saying it's hard. I'm saying it's interesting. It's interesting.
I am 100% on Jeff's side on this one, by the way.
It makes no sense. That is the entire reason for doing a prequel. Is like, how did we get to the Quiet Place?
Yes.
This movie literally just jump cuts to the Quiet Place.
I think anybody on the ground would be like, we don't know either. We just heard this from the military. That's the perspective.
Surmising what the movie promised to show us.
How do you?
The movie says it's day one. How did we
this is
figure
the
it
day
out?
one for somebody on the ground who is not like the leaders of military strategy. They're just responding to what the government tells you.
Thing in the second movie.
Yeah.
The second movie showed that exact thing.
I have no recollection that the second movie does not exist.
Yeah.
Well, that's your problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Those of us that do remember literally what Lupita Nyong'o's character experiences is the exact same thing that happens in a different place in the for second movie.
In the opening scene of the second movie, it's a big deal, Devindra, because they brought John Krasinski back.
Yes.
Even though, spoilers for the first movie, John Krasinski dies at the end of the first movie. So then it's like the second movie begins. Oh my gosh, John Krasinski's there, right? And it's like, oh, this is a flashback.
We're showing the first moment that happened
to when the aliens first invaded.
Identically to how this movie plays out. So what new information are we getting? We're just getting the same movie with different people. And hey, I like those people. I thought it was lovely. All the things you said about them, Devindra, I totally agree with. Like the humanity, the sort of connection that they find, all of that is lovely. But like, what are we doing? What are we even doing here? Don't tell me that you're like, it adds zero mythos. We know absolutely nothing additional. In fact, we know less because at the end of each of the first two movies, they figure out a cool thing that is just not touched on in this movie at all. And So like, I just found myself going, hey, you made a promise to me as the viewer saying we're gonna see how this all became, and you literally jump cut to we've got it all figured out
Let me just ask for a pause here. Where did the movie make this promise?
in the title.
In the title.
In the title.
The idea
How?
is that it's called A Quiet Place Day One. So the promise is we will see how the world became a quiet. In fact, in the trailer, it's like you will see how the world became a quiet place, right? And the thing that Jeff is referring to is that essentially people figure out how the aliens work real fast, like
and off screen.
Apparently within like 20 minutes, right?
Yes.
And I understand that like it might not take that. It might not take a week. But I think it's going to take longer than like 20 minutes, which is like
I don't know if it's 20 minutes, but yeah.
Regardless of the length of time, that is the interesting stuff. How do we gather the information? How do we figure it out as the humans trying to survive this? How? What is the process by which we figure it out? The movie just completely ignores that. It literally jump cuts from not knowing to knowing. And it's crazy to me because that's the juice. That's the stuff that I'm here for. Like, tell me how we got to the quiet place.
Is that the juice? I don't know. Okay, so finish your piece, Jeff. I never felt the promise. I've also seen the trailers for this. I never felt like, oh, we're going to see the behind the scenes of how it all happened. It was just like, oh, we're going to do A Quiet Place in New York. That's what's different.
Right. Like I think Devindra didn't take the marketing that seriously, which is fine. You know, like it's
then call out Quiet Place New York. The thing that maybe slanting your perspective is that you don't remember the second movie did this exact moment.
The exact thing. Yeah.
Okay.
It did it already. So like the day one-ness of it, we got to see. Like crazy, we're having a normal day and now the day is not normal. We saw it. It plays out the same way. It's insane to me that there's nothing new
I do remember like what happens in the second movie now that you guys are talking about it, but it's not the same because it was happening in a quiet little like rural town. The experience is really different seeing it happening like within a major city, which is known for its noise too.
I disagree that it's different. It's not fundamentally different. The different thing would be how the people figured it out. That would be the different thing.
I mean, that's
like,
what you
what
wanted
do we do?
To see. Yes, I get that. That's what you guys wanted to see. We often talk about the thing about trailers. Like, I don't care about how I don't know some story about how this character got the specific object or something. And I guess for a prequel, sometimes you do want to see that. But in this case, like what it gave me was something I didn't expect. And to me, that's more interesting than like, oh, I expected the bit by bit, the blow by blow of how the military figured this out. It's because it's not.
Well, it's not even the military,
that's just
dude.
Kind of whoever it is.
It's the people.
Our
main characters.
It's not that. To me, that part isn't that.
That's not what necessarily Devindra was interested in, and it's fine that he didn't miss anything about it. I will say this. I echo Jeff's complaint about everything he just said. Like I agree completely. I don't even necessarily think it's a fault of the film. It's just weird that you would call it A Quiet Place Day One and then not show any of that stuff about.
So it's the title of the issue here. That's what I'm wondering.
Well, that's one part of the issue, but the other issue is fundamentally, I don't think this movie really lives up to its promise of taking place. If you were like, call it A Quiet Place New York, there is one scene really where we see like what it's like to have. How many people live in New York? Like 20 million or so, millions of people, right? Like, and what that would be like interacting with these aliens. And that's it. Most of like 80+% of the movie is you're following two people, right? And so it's like, well, what was the point? Like, that's what we are doing in the other Quiet Place movies. So the purpose of doing it day one is to kind of show how people find this is okay. They're not doing that. Well, what about being in New York? Well, we're showing how like millions of people would interact with this. And it's like, well, we're not really doing that either. So it's like, okay, so you just wanted to make another Quiet Place with like skyscrapers around instead. And that's essentially what it is. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I think I echo Jeff's sentiments that like you're missing a lot of potential from the premise that you yourself have laid out. So now the movie does do other things well, right?
Yeah, there may be potential for other things. Kind of
and
what
I
I'm
acknowledge
saying.
that. I agree that it does some things well. I just think it feels extremely redundant. It doesn't tread any new ground as a third movie in a franchise. And like if this was the first Quiet Place movie, I think I would love it. But like, I just felt like, what are we doing here? What like, we're just seeing these people go through the exact same thing. It is so similar. The beats of what we do are so similar. Now, the specifics of their situations are different, but marginally so. And there are some lovely moments, but I just feel like, hey, man, ostensibly, you assume that I am a fan of the first two movies to come to the third one. So I kind of feel like you need, you got a new setting, you got new characters, like do something new.
One thing I'm going to add to this is like, so you guys are referring to part two, the second movie shows us the opening sequence, right? Where we kind of get the initial invasion. We don't, then it jump cuts to the time after the end of the first movie, right? So we don't see how society itself actually responds.
But we don't see that in this movie either.
No, we do, but we do actually see that. And a lot of that is just like...
The problem in this movie, Devindra, is the aliens come and then almost immediately everyone understands how the aliens work. That is the problem, right? There's no,
I understand
like,
that.
Hey, did you notice the aliens are like? There's no like people writing down furiously. Like, I think people would figure it out pretty quickly that like, hey, if you talk, you die. Like,
they
figure
that's what I'm saying.
But it's like there's no, that process is not shown at all.
Okay,
I think a lot of people,
so I grant you that. I grant you that the movie skips over that process, which I think would happen pretty damn quickly. But okay, what we do see is society being like, oh, this morning we had a functioning society. Now it's all gone. And what this movie is an exploration through frickin' obliteration, guys. Like, and we don't see that in A Quiet Place Part 2 of the people being like, oh, well, what do I live for now? You know, what do I do next? And for this particular
movie does that either. Honestly,
no. I actually now I got to disagree with Jeff. Like
this person,
I think that's what this movie is trying to do.
Yes,
certainly what Devindra is saying. I think that's what this movie is trying
to do.
And
you walk through, it's just shell shock. And you walk through. This movie is very much like a 9/11 allegory too, of just like
very much.
There is a lot of that going on here of this vibrant
scenes
city,
of like people covered in ash,
covered in
and
dust.
Like, you know,
a vibrant city. It all takes in the southern part of Manhattan too, which is not too far from where 9/11 happened, like near the World Trade Center area. But it is people just being shell shocked. Of like, oh, this was a functioning society. How do we survive from here? And the early scenes are, you know, people learning stuff over the radio, but also people freaking the hell out, or two kids who are just like lost and don't know what to do. Like, there's a lot of humanity in this movie that I think does ignore the technical work you'd expect from maybe a genre sequel or prequel. But I guess I'm more interested in that because it's sort of like The Last of Us too, right? The Last of Us pretty much cuts way beyond the point where, you know, society falls. Like, we get that moment and then we cut to 30 years later. I am really interested in that moment right after, where like we have to figure out what the hell to do. And I guess what's interesting about this character is that, and this is not a huge spoiler, but she's somebody struggling with cancer and it seems like she's in a hospice. She is dealing with the, you know, the fact that her death is coming soon. And for her, this whole experience also means a little different. You know, she has one specific goal, which I think if you write it down and you talk about it, it sounds kind of silly. But really what she wants to do is just like reflect on her life. But there's stuff we'll talk about.
Well, we should probably get to spoilers.
Yeah, let's get to spoilers.
I'm saying there are many scenes of just people reacting to the fact that this is all, our society is gone. Guys, what do I do? You get the stuff we'll talk about in spoilers, but you get some help from the government, and even that may not work out the way you expect. It's just, to me, that's what's interesting. But I guess that's why I dug this movie more than you guys.
I feel like this is a repeat of our Hitman conversation again. Only, you know, this movie gestures at really deep, thought-provoking ideas of the kind that Devindra just mentioned. Right? What is the purpose of living if you know you're going to die? And that's true for any of us, but it's very true for people who are in hospice care. And like, what is what meaning can be found in life? What experiences do you wish to have in that situation? Right? Like, I think that that initially when I really like, you find out the first like 5 minutes, that's the premise of the movie. So I'm like, oh, like Michael Sarnowski, this is going to be an exploration of like mortality and like what, you know, what meaning can be derived from life in our final moments and so on. And there's some of that, but the movie never really explored that idea in a satisfying way. Similarly, like society is collapsing and how do humans deal with that, I think is barely the barest of touching upon it in this movie. And so like there's big ideas and interesting ideas that this movie brings up that I don't think it really delivers on. I will say what it does deliver on are the creature sequences. I think they're called death angels, is my understanding. And anytime those things appear on screen, it is really terrifying. And like the way that they're shot, the action sequences. I think this is one of the few. I think this is like in the other movies, you weren't dealing with like hundreds of these things. I think you were dealing with like a few.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the first times where you see like, oh, this is what it would be like if there was like freaking like 80 of these things running down the street at once. It would be terrifying. I mean, I am curious how they are not bothered by the noise the other Death Angels make.
I was going to make that same point. It
so
makes no sense.
Freaking loud,
So loud.
all the time.
They are making so much racket, and no one. Your shirt gets a tear in it, and there's one ready to kill you. But they can destroy cars and shatter windows and clomp with their heavy footfalls, and none of their friends come. I don't know how they differentiate that.
I mean, I think like this is. In my opinion, if you think about the world of The Quiet Place for longer than like 18 seconds, like nothing makes any sense. Like,
this was my issue with the first movie.
Right.
Basically,
like, people would be using noise making machines all the time, like to distract these things. Hey, I'm just gonna throw a Coke can over there and like so I can go get my fucking food today. You know, like they would be using, and not to mention, spoiler for the first movie again, or I guess it's the second movie, but basically like they find out, guys, loud noises really mess these things up. And it's like, wouldn't that be literally the first thing we would try once we realize that they are sensitive to sound?
Has nobody read a Spider-Man comic? Yeah.
Right. And so it's just like nothing makes any sense, but whatever. Assuming we accept the premise. I do think that the creature sequences are awesome in this movie.
Well, the
There's four or five creature sequences, and pretty much every single one is really effective. So, like, just in terms of thrills, I do think this movie delivers. Go ahead, Jeff. And
I agree with everything you said, Dave. I think that issue of the noise disparities is more pronounced in this movie
because there's so many of them, right?
Well, but also because you literally have a major character, i.e., the cat, that can move silently. Can like a cat leaping onto a windowsill makes no discernible human detectable sound, right? These are very, stealthy creatures. And it's like, oh, well, if you were a creature that relied on sound to echolocate, to figure out where things are, wouldn't you also make no sound when you move, or attempt to make no sound when you, it's like, I can't help but think about it because you're focusing on a creature that does just that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It feels like a major misstep for me.
All right, let's get to spoilers for A Quiet Place Day 1 starting right now. All right, guys. Right out the gate, this is a controversial opinion probably, but right out the gate, I want to acknowledge that Lupita Nyong'o is awesome in this movie. I think she's like completely holds the movie together. The movie would not work if it were not for her. Love her as an actor. Love her performance in this movie. She's great. I think it was a mistake for them to kill Alex Wolff off in this movie and replace him with Joseph Quinn.
I totally agree. Like that's the dynamic that you want to see progress through the whole movie.
Absolutely, because Alex Wolff, I'm like, this is a guy I actually give a shit. This is a guy who like has given up devoted his life to caring about dying people. Like, and he and Lupita Nyong'o have a great like rapport together, and it's like, oh, that's interesting to see how that develops. They kill him off like 30 minutes into the movie. Meanwhile, in comes this Joseph Quinn guy who's fucking creepy ass dude that's just following Lupita Nyong'o around. Who I'm like, I don't give a shit about this guy. Like, I
totally agree. And they set it up because the first guy is like, hey, that's what friends do. And she's like, we're not friends. I'm like, okay, well, that's our arc. We've established the arc where we're going to become friends.
Like, and then they just kill him off. I'm like, did Alex Wolff, like his schedule changed? He couldn't do the rest of the movie? Like, what happened here? Anyway.
Can I talk about like what I think is actually happening here? Because the point of this movie, and the reason why I'm really digging it is Lupita Nyong'o is somebody who is dealing with a terminal illness and is just like, fuck humanity. Her opening scene is her just saying, I hate you. You suck. You suck. Like all this. Like that's her.
Suck. You're cool.
You're cool. Yeah. But that's what it is. She's like, I'm kind of a jerk. I hate everybody right now. And I think her anger is purposeful and righteous. And yes, she tells Alex Wolff's character, who I think that character is really compelling and interesting, because he's like, he's a nurse who's trying to take care of these folks, and what that guy must go through is tough too, because he will befriend these people who will all die.
Yeah,
and he can't do anything to stop it. And I think the movie could have maybe spent a little more time on that, but yeah, one of the last things she says to him is like, "Yeah, we're not friends." Then the world falls apart. Then he dies, and that's it. Like, it's not like she has a chance to redeem what she said or that relationship. And here's a new guy, and I think the way they introduce Joseph Quinn is just like random, like he comes out of a puddle somewhere or something. It is really random.
He literally spawns from like
he
a
spawns
subway
from nothing.
station.
I mean,
right?
he was probably in the subway, and like, you're trapped down there. The subway floods. You got to get the hell out. Hopefully you make it out. It's the story of her meeting a complete stranger, somebody who is kind of creepy and is kind of following her, but also like, I guess we have to help each other. I guess that is the point of us being on this planet together, because if we don't help each other, who are we? What do we have left? Because society has fallen. So it is the journey of them kind of connecting. And I think I also was was leery of Joseph Quinn early on, because like it does seem like they threw him in there, but they do connect, and I think really like emotional ways.
You found the connection between those two characters to be very meaningful.
It took a long time.
Yeah.
But then I saw what the movie was doing, and the movie was her trying to be like, maybe I should at least try to care about other people. Maybe I can find that part of myself again. And that's the finale. That's the ending of the movie. That's self-sacrifice.
I just think
I just want to acknowledge I just want to acknowledge that is beautifully said by Devindra, and that is a great defense of the film. So
agreed.
I'm just saying that's what's in the movie.
Yes.
Now, if you're not seeing that, or you don't think the movie is spelling that out enough, okay, fine. But it's there.
I agree. I agree that is the text of the film. Yeah.
I'm not missing that. I see it. I recognize it. And as I acknowledge many times, there's just some lovely stuff. I mean, that sequence where he does the magic trick for her is beautiful. It's lovely. I'm saying, I believe her saving her hospice nurse at the end of the movie would be more powerful to me. That would be a more poignant, more powerful journey of her realizing her own usefulness and humanity, rather than this creepo who just gloms onto her for no reason. I think I envision that the exact message that you're talking about working better with a character that I immediately love.
I'm not saying it wouldn't be powerful. I think it would be powerful in a different way, but it also seems like, I don't know, to me, that is the formula, right? That is, initial conflict that we'll work through by the end of the movie. Like, the formula for these things is like, yes, you set up the conflict early on, by the end of the movie, it's solved. And I just think it's interesting this movie doesn't do that. It doesn't even give her the chance to have that reconciliation.
Right. That sometimes the last interaction you have with someone is a terrible one, and then it's like, and they're gone. That's part of life sometimes. But I think, Jeff, like, probably fundamentally, the Joseph Quinn character just didn't really work for us. We don't
really know much about him, and I mean,
it's hard to have a new character introduced like 45 minutes of the movie in a movie where you can't really speak to each other, right? Like, that's just difficult to do, and have that be someone that we're really emotionally invested in. They do talk like when it's raining and near water and shit, but like they can't really have dialogue in the normal way that people have dialogue in movies. So. Anyway,
I think the main thing is, like, he's introduced as a guy who is scared and doesn't know what to do, and he has no inner strength to himself, which is why he's like, well, he's like a lost puppy. He's like, well, we'll hang out, right? Like, we got something. And I feel like that's what the movie is trying to set up, and also the finale of the movie is him also finding that inner strength to do the thing he has to do to save himself. And that's something he didn't have at the beginning too. So I think the movie does give us those things. It gives us other things. Maybe not the initial reconciliation you want with the nurse, though.
Well, if there's one thing I've learned about the Quiet Place franchise, it's that a key feature is that someone will sacrifice themselves unnecessarily. That they could have easily gotten out of the situation without having to sacrifice themselves, and they still do it.
What's the unnecessary part?
Yeah,
well, she does all the things, and then she just watches him go, and then she's like,
she can't go too, because then they will chase her.
They could make the noise and both run.
She's also like halfway to death, dude.
Right,
Like she
right.
is, she is
I understand
barely
that, but
Yeah,
also
doing
like
anything. Yeah,
she could still have been on the boat and had a few more. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I think she is a character who has accepted her death.
Yeah.
That is what's interesting. She is not like when everyone else is going to the boat to be saved. She's like, do I want that? Or do I want to have one last memory of the place where I was with my father when I was a child?
Right.
And she goes literally against the crowd for that. So
I was being more cheeky about the first movie when John Krasinski absolutely didn't have to kill himself.
It's very much a Papa Kent moment in Superman Returns.
A Papa Kent moment, yeah. For
Yeah.
sure. And okay, so all that said, I gotta say there were many things I liked about the movie. I was rarely bored in this movie. I thought the creature sequences were great. I have to accept that nothing in this movie really makes sense, you know, like in the premise of the concept makes sense. Like, for instance, I'll throw this out there. Like, there's so many sequences where, like, oh, hey, don't make any noise. Like, they're right there. But it's like, we, the audience, can hear the characters breathing heavily. And it's like, even a human can hear that. Like, so you're telling me the alien with a hypersensitive hearing can't hear what we're hearing? Anyway, okay. Putting all that aside, which is very difficult for me to do, I think that gotta say, love the ending needle drop and the way that it plays out, and like you see the creature like come down right on the beat of the music, and it smash cuts to black.
I think that should be the lasting legacy of this franchise, because I still remember the end of the first movie, and it's just the shotgun cock cut to black, and that's like, yes, it's
I also like
my crowd almost cheered at that moment. Yeah.
I like that we set the movie in a very specific time period by having it be an iPod Nano.
Yes.
And well, she had an iPod.
She had a full iPod
as well.
Yeah. Oh, I thought doesn't he charge the?
Yeah.
He charges
that
the
was
Nano.
weird to me. Was she in the first scene? She's holding a full blown iPod. If you're watching us on YouTube, like one of these things, she's holding one of these.
Wow, you just had that.
You just pulled it out.
Yes,
okay. That's an iPod video, though, is what that is.
Yeah. I don't even know. This is an iPod Classic, but yes, the one she was holding was older than this one.
Listen, back then we often had multiple devices, one for running, one for.
She had
doing
she had one that was like had the spinning hard drive.
Yeah,
right?
so you can't run with that.
Yeah. But and then later on we see that she has the iPod Nano. So maybe she had multiple.
I love the it's very much the Chekhov's iPod speaker, because you know that's gonna something's gonna happen with that speaker.
Yeah.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be bad. Most likely bad.
We've also established already, you know, that pets are not my strong suit, but you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about this. I don't think it's easy to leap into water holding a cat.
I think a lot by the point where the cat is in a bag and they're like going through like a lot of the stuff with the cat, you're just like, oh, none of this is real at all.
I feel
because
like
the
that
cat
motherfucker's getting scratched if he tries to jump in that
getting
water with a cat.
But also the cat would be meowing and yowling. Like, cats can move silently, but they are not silent animals. Like, they will just spend entire nights yowling at the moon, you know?
Yeah.
And
I have to
this
say,
cat is very quiet.
I have to say that this is some of the best cat acting,
great cat work
I've seen in a movie. Like,
who
knows?
Is it digital? Is it a digital cat?
Like, I have to imagine some of the shots.
Some of it is definitely.
I have to imagine, right? But there's a reason most movies don't have cats. Most TV shows don't have cats. Most movies don't have cats.
Mm-hmm.
It is extremely difficult to get cats to do a thing you want them to do.
And this cat's on a leash. This cat's moving around sets. Oh man.
Well, it is funny because the majority of the time I think people are carrying the cat, which makes that makes it a lot easier to actually have that work out. But
I just was literally like, at the end when he leaps into the water with the cat, I was like, yeah, Vlad, come on. Okay, giant space aliens that want to murder everyone based on sound. I'm with you.
You'll buy that.
Leaping into the Hudson River with a cat? No, sorry.
I think what is fascinating is like, this feels like Sarnowski's thing, and his thing is humans having connections with animals. You know, this cat means a lot. This cat is also kind of almost like magical, because he's the one who finds Joseph Quinn's character. You know, And
I will say one other thing I'm disappointed by about this movie, which is like, putting aside the day one promise, putting aside all that stuff, like, one of the compelling ideas I think of setting it in New York is to see how large groups of people react to this thing. And that premise just fundamentally they do not live up to in this movie. Like, every single time there is a massive group of people in this movie, they're completely gone by the next scene. Like, for instance, opening scene, Lupita. I will say, by the way, really effective opening sequence. Where
Great.
One of the best title reveals, I have to say.
Yeah.
I've seen it. So there's like a massive action scene. The aliens come. Lupita Nyong'o is knocked out, unconscious, and then you see A Quiet Place Day One on screen. I was like, okay, that's well done, movie. Like,
No, it happens. So I think it happens a little bit after that, though. It happens after she's knocked out. Because I was specifically.
No, she is knocked unconscious, and then A Quiet Place. Everything goes to black, and then A Quiet Place Day One. I remember it extremely vividly. But then, like, okay, she's in the theater, and there's like 50 people in the theater, right? There's like all these. It's like, oh my, I'm thinking to myself, oh my, how are you gonna like control all these people? How are you gonna like communicate with them if you can't make any like all these interesting questions come to mind? Movie doesn't address any of them. Later on, they appear in this church, and there's like people like praying in the church. Oh, interesting. Like, and then literally the next scene, they leave the church. They never see those people again. Like, it's like one of the cool concepts of setting A Quiet Place in New York is seeing how groups of people interact with this. Never going to deal with it. And so that is a massive loss of potential, in my opinion, of this premise.
Agreed. It may be like a budget scope issue too. Like this was meant to be a monster movie and not like a large scale. Oh, we have tons of other actors that are in speaking roles. In this kind of thing. And I feel like,
but then don't set it in New York. Like, that's what. I will say it's cool to see the I Am Legend stuff of like them blowing up the bridges. That was like, oh wow, that's haunting imagery.
It is haunting imagery. Like I think at the very least, like the story. This movie is written and directed by Sarnowski. It seems like a story idea from
Krasinski
and Sarnowski. So I wonder like where the idea for this came. But I think the pitch was just A Quiet Place in New York. And I guess like I don't know like what the issue was. But yeah, I would have liked to see more people. That one scene that we do get though, I think is pretty effective of just like, hey, go to the South Street Seaport. There will be boats there to save you all. And people
we're all walking. This seems safe. We're all walking.
We're all walking.
I'm just going to trust everyone around me to be quiet. Cool.
Everybody else, everything else that people need to move.
Literally, all of these thousands of people already know to not make noise. By the way, but yes, we're all walking, and then we'll all trust each other to not make noise, and this will not go badly at all. So, anyway.
I agree. I would have liked to see like more with people. Like if this movie is only 90 minutes long. Yeah, and I feel like this movie does.
Yeah, it gets in, it gets out. It does.
It gets in, it gets out. But if you want these scenes with people, if you want to build other characters, then this movie's got to be 2 hours long. This movie has to be longer. And I would have actually loved to spend more time in this universe to get those characters. This movie doesn't feel like it has time to breathe. I think that's probably one of its biggest failings, I guess.
I mean, they don't even do the bare minimum of like they had the helicopters being like they can't swim. They didn't have the they listen to you. It's noise that they're attracted to.
They said that at some point.
Did they? I don't.
Yeah, early on. They did announce that. Yeah, they were saying try to stay quiet and things like that. And also, we see the cable lines coming in too.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway,
radio lines.
All that said, some great things about it. Some not great things about it. Devindra, appreciate the spirited defense. Jeff, I agree with you a lot on like what this movie missed out in terms of its potential. But at the end of the day, it is really impressive that Michael Sarnowski made a movie.
Let me just say one more thing. It's like we bemoan prequels, right? We bemoan going back, seeing the discovery of how one character got his hat or some stupid thing. And I am at least appreciating somebody took that idea. It's like, oh, you're going to give me money to make a Quiet Place prequel? Okay, I'll make a Quiet Place prequel. It'll also be like a meaningful exploration of humanity and the value of life. Like I felt more life affirmed coming out of this movie, which is about the destruction of society, than I did going online and seeing the news about the debate. So it did work in ways that I think prequels don't usually get to work.
I will let him have the last word on that, even though I disagree.
Yeah, I know you disagree, Jeff. I know.
But you just didn't let him have the last word just now. By saying that statement, you're not letting him have the last word.
Yeah,
I'm just not going to say a single thing about how vehemently I disagree.
Yeah, we get it. But we asked for prequels to be different, and here's a prequel being different, and I'm appreciating the difference.
thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.